If I have predicated my identity on being smart, and if I have predicated being smart on being good at math, and the moment that I'm not good at math, that takes out the linchpin in my entire sense of self. We can't keep demonizing one or the other. We can't say you can only be a critical thinker in conceptual knowledge, or you can only access mathematics because you've mastered the fundamentals. There has to be a space for everyone. If everyone can be a math person, that means everyone has to show up to mathematics in the way that makes sense to them.
Hey guys, it's me, Vanessa, and welcome back to Math Therapy. Okay, so today's guest is my friend, Shelby Strong, math educator, coach, consultant, and just one of my favorite people. The thing about Shelby is that she has extremely strong opinions about even the most innocuous of math education topics. And literally every time we talk on the phone or like via voice note, we both end up screaming, "Oh my God, we just basically recorded a podcast episode." And like at a certain point, it kind of just got weird that she wasn't on my actual podcast. So today is the day. We covered a ton of spicy topics, from the whole "are algorithms destroying children" debacle to the gatekeeping that happens when we define who gets to be a math person. And we also have an honest and compassionate discussion about the guilt and pressure teachers feel when they just want to help students, but the rules keep changing on them. We're also going to get into the dangers of building one's entire identity around one thing, and why some people resist more people being invited into that thing. Math education, gaming culture. This is one of those episodes that absolutely everyone needs to listen to, because at its core, it's about the real reason the world can often feel so divided. And if you're anything like me right now, you're probably wondering why we can't all just stop pointing fingers at one another. And this episode really reminded me that we are all just humans who want to belong. And sometimes the fear that we don't belong is what leads us to trying to exclude others. And if some point during this convo, you're like, "That is what I've been trying to say," please share this podcast. Send it to a friend, post a clip on your socials, or just like throw it in your group chat with 30 exclamation points. And if something in this episode lands, text us. You can text the podcast by hitting the link in the show notes for this episode. I really want to hear from you. Okay, guys, I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. Let's get into it. My first question for you is, because you told me to ask you this, what does Dave Grohl have to do with math? Let's hear it.
Okay. I was watching an interview with Dave Grohl a couple months ago where he is an old interview, but he's talking about how he never really received a formal music education. And yet, no one's going to look at him and say, "You're not a musician," right? And you could argue that he wouldn't have made the music that he made if he had received a formal music education. And so there's this guy, Paul Lockhart, who wrote A Mathematician's Lament a couple of years ago, where he talks about how math doesn't get treated the way that art gets treated. And yet, think about someone who is a musician for, say, the Philharmonic, or some sort of orchestral musician. They did receive a formal music education. They do, read music, and many of them are not original composers. Are we going to point at them and say, "You're not a musician because you don't write your own music and all you do is reproduce someone else's"? And so I think that, we've got this spectrum of musicians. You've got your Dave Grohls and you've got your, first chair cellists. You've got this spectrum of mathematical ability. You've got people who are really good at algorithms and really good at following procedures. And then you have people who are super creative and like to dig in and unpack different things. And I have absolutely been guilty of, kind of giving my students a hard time who are really good at the algorithms, who are really good at the procedures, and bless their heart, couldn't critically think their way out of a wet paper bag. And that is kind of the shift that has happened in math education, where we've moved towards this more like creative unpacking. And I'm not saying we don't need that, but I'm also saying that we can't keep demonizing one or the other. We can't say you can only be, a critical thinker in conceptual knowledge, or you can only access mathematics because you've mastered the fundamentals, whatever the hell the fundamentals are. That there has to be a space for everyone if we're going to run around saying everyone can be a math person. If everyone can be a math person, that means everyone has to show up to mathematics in the way that makes sense to them.
Oh my God. I am so glad you just started with this hot, juicy take, because I could not agree. The thing is also with me and Shelby that I've realized is often I'll have a thought. I may express it, I may not, but no matter what, Shelby will express it in a way more articulate way then I will. I'm kind of having you on here to just actually make me sound better by translating what I mean into a mic drop. But what
the Vanessa translator, like, this is what she meant.
But I love that you said that, because as you may or may not know, my debate with Pam Harris actually was about this exact thing. And now, I mean, no shade. I just had Pam on the pod. We had an amazing conversation. But part of what she talks about is the idea that if you're using an algorithm, it's fake math. And I actually take a really big issue with that. And we've already talked about this publicly. So this isn't about her. A lot of people have that thinking, exactly like you said.
And the reason why I started thinking about it is because of this idea that, I do think that we do need to do more of an emphasis on conceptual understanding of mathematics because we have spent so long without it. Like, algorithms didn't come from nowhere, right? And I think that's where we got it twisted in the last several decades, is that we hold up, particularly in America, American standard algorithms as the way of doing math, and anything else is not acceptable. But then we went kind of too far in the other direction to say only thinking about this with 12 steps is the way to really understand mathematics. And I think we have to find a way to kind of come into harmony where, you'll hear critics all the time saying, oh, well, if the students don't know their times tables, what are they going to do? Count on their fingers every time they have to do a problem? No, I don't want a kid counting on their fingers every time they have to do a problem. And I also want them to be able to self-select the method that makes the most sense for them in the moment, not the most sense ever. Mm-hmm. I think that some people tend to go, oh, the algorithm is the only way, or, oh, partial products is the only way, or, oh, this other method is the only way. But having an arsenal of strategies is about being responsive to the moment in front of you. So I'm not going to use standard algorithm if it's 1,000 minus 998 because that's stupid. But I am going to use it in another case where I don't want to think that hard. And this thing works.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, literally, take math out of it for a second. This happens with so many things in life, is we're all gung-ho about this one way of doing things. All of a sudden, as a society or group of people or educators or whatever, we're like, oh my God. Yeah, it's like eating, you know what I mean? It's like, I've been eating sugar my entire life, and all of a sudden I have this moment of wait, everyone's saying sugar's bad. And instead of being oh, you know what? I'll have sugar when it makes sense, but maybe not all the time. I'm going to eat zero sugar. I'm going to do none of it. And then my quality of life decreases in another sense.
It's like the person who says oh, I'm going to stop eating candy. I'm going to eat fruit instead. And someone's like, well, fruit's got sugar too. And it's like, fuck you. Do you want me to make a better decision or not?
Yeah. 100%. And contextual. It's oh, maybe I'll have some candy. Maybe not for breakfast. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe around Halloween. It doesn't have to be. I really agree. I think it's that's what happens. And I really think it's because we just tend towards black and white thinking, right? It's so much easier.
It's human nature.
Well, and also, what requires more thinking than to actually discern which strategy to use? It's easier to not think. Can you also, just for our listeners, and actually for me, because I'm curious where you'll go with this, can you briefly just define algorithm?
Yeah.
So we all know what we're talking about?
So when I'm thinking standard algorithm, I'm thinking what I learned in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. The rules that my teacher said, this is how you add. This is how you subtract. This is how you multiply. This is how you divide. So long division is your standard algorithm, where you've got the little house and you've got to put the number on the outside into the number on the big side. And there's some sort of goofy acronym for what to do after you've because you have to use all the operations when you're doing long division. This reminds me of a story I wanted to tell you. So
great.
I moved to Massachusetts 3 years ago. And when I first moved up here, I went and did a job kind of a little far away from where I ended up living, and got there, no problem. Had a great time with the teachers, and it's time to go home. Well, I'm leaving Boston, and no one had told me that the Sumner Tunnel was going to be closed, which is this big tunnel around Boston. But more importantly, no one had told Google Maps that the Sumner Tunnel was going to be closed. And so my GPS kept trying to direct me into this tunnel that I couldn't take. So I end up just driving in circles surrounding Logan Airport because I don't know how to get home. I just moved here. And what I thought about was, if I had been back home in New Orleans and the Crescent City connection had been closed and I couldn't take that bridge, it's fine. I could have taken the Huey I have other ways to get there. Is that the option I'm going to choose every day? No, but it's the option I'm going to choose when the way that I want to go is closed to me. And in the same way, that's what we were really trying to accomplish with mathematics now, is not to say only take this path or, this path is wrong. It's take the path that you're comfortable with. And when you run into a situation where that path is blocked to you for whatever reason, then you know the landscape well enough to be able to not panic when it comes time to take another path instead of just circling the airports 3 times.
So let's just take a step back here. We are kind of vilifying the algorithms and that way. I would also like to say there was a time when, people keep saying, well, you don't need it anymore. We don't need people to punch things into calculators. We don't need algorithms. Calculators can do that. We need people to think. And let's be fair, there was a time where that was a skill that was way more necessary than it was now, let's say. However, it doesn't mean that an algorithm is not useful. But now we've vilified it to the point of being like, if you're using an algorithm, if you're just following rules, you're mimicking, you're not thinking. There's so much about this.
Let's go back to the musician example, right? There's a difference between playing a piece of music from reading the music and playing it and really feeling it. There's a reason some people are first chair, right? Because yes, they're playing the music that someone else wrote, but they are dialed into it. And I think the problem is when all you know is an algorithm and you don't understand why the algorithm works and it goes wrong, then how do you get yourself out of it, right? How do you stop circling the airport? And that's where I think that we gotten it wrong for so long, is that because the adults didn't understand why the algorithm worked, they couldn't answer student questions about, well, why do I do that? And what if I didn't want to use that? I was talking about addition with someone the other day, and we were adding 2 3-digit numbers, and I started from the left. I started with the hundreds place, and I was acting in the role of a student, and they were like, no, you have to start with the ones place. And I was like, actually, I don't. That's a convention. That's not something that I have to do. And that's why I think algorithms are being vilified, because we're saying you have to do it this way. Yeah, you do have to do it that way if you're using the algorithm. If you're not, then there is a way to still approach mathematics. And we have to be comfortable and confident enough ourselves with not being scared of someone doing something that doesn't look like what we're used to. And I have seen a lot of fear in classrooms where teachers will cut students off before letting them finish their thought, because what they're hearing so far doesn't sound like what they're expecting. And instead of letting them finish the thought, there's this fear of, if that makes sense to that student, but if they start talking and other kids are going to hear it and then they're going to get confused, and I have to save the children from being confused. You don't have to save the children from being confused. You can just let them be confused and ask their questions.
Teaching an algorithm without context and reason, I think, and I'm curious what you think, is different than, let's say I want to show you the algorithm as a teacher, because that's what I'm comfortable with right now. But I can explain to you why it works.
Great.
Is that different?
Yeah, I think so.
That's fine, right?
I taught a lot of things. So when I taught Algebra 1, the thing that a lot of people remember, at least the name of, even if they don't remember what it actually is the quadratic formula. Right, for solving things. They may not remember what the formula is, but they remember hearing that word.
I love the quadratic formula, guys. I know it to so many songs.
Okay, I'm so glad that you said songs, because I spent years telling kids to memorize this thing, and they were like, ugh, why? And I was like, because it makes your life easier, and that's all I had for them. And then what I started doing instead was I started with completing the square instead, where they had to literally visualize the square and solve that way. And then I made them solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and gave them an hour, gave the whole class period to just go solve this thing, figure it out, off you go. And by the end of it, they had x equals blah, 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 blah. And I said, do you feel like doing that every time? And they were like, ugh, no, because they're teenagers. Of course they don't want to. And I said, well, what if I told you could just memorize this thing instead? And they were like, we can do that?
So here's the thing that this is bringing up for me. This idea of who we call math people and who we don't. We used to call those who could just do the algorithms, get the answer. They were the math people. Those people identified as math people. Now, all of a sudden, this is actually crazy, because this is almost like reverse gatekeeping or something, because now we're like, what?
I just remembered something when you were saying that. I was thinking about how wrong I was to judge a child for only being able to use algorithms and not being able to, critically think, and not being able to engage with more conceptual understanding, when if every year up until the point that they met to me, that is what was valued, was following the rules, was following an algorithm, was being able to follow the steps, then now I'm going to punish them for meeting the expectations that were set before they came to me.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where we end up having a big issue. I'm always open to the idea, like I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of strong feelings on things, and I am open to the idea that I could be wrong. And I think that's where, like, that's not very profitable, because if you're open to the idea that you could be wrong, then you just went around the country and sold your ideas to all these people and profited very heavily off of it. And that doesn't work for certain voices in this space, to be able to be willing to say, I held this idea, I genuinely believed it at the time, I've heard something new or I've considered something else, and now I want to reflect on that. We're expecting that from the students, but when the adults do it, we call them two-faced and we call them grifters and we call them whatever else.
I am actually stunned by how well you've put this, as always. You honestly always blow my mind, because you're so right. And I was just saying to someone the other day, oh my God, fucking Dr. Raj Shah, he asked me what my superpowers were. And I said, one of them was that I can see both sides of everything. Like I can have a very strong opinion. I can see the other side. And you are so right that, there are those people who talk, this is exactly who you're talking about. There are people who talk in this way where it's like, I found the solution. Like all you've got to do is this thing, and this is the way to do it. And we both get it, because you just use the word profitable. And whether you mean that monetarily or just people buying into you and your idea, you're right? It's like when you look at these self-help coaches and stuff, the reason I'm so it's like, I want to be a self-help cult leader, but I would never be able to say, I've got the answer, like do this. And I wouldn't be able to do it, because I'm so aware, like you are, that right now, this is what I think. And I'm so open to being wrong, because I want to always be learning and growing. And it would be insane to think that like, I for sure know something. None of us for sure know anything.
But I think part of why it's so scary to say I could be wrong is because it's not just you and I, two adults sitting and talking into microphones on a podcast. There's children's futures at stake. And so the idea of getting it wrong, the stakes are very, very high if we're getting it wrong in front of children, and we're getting it wrong for the children. And I think that's where you see all of these science of whatever wars, is because we are so locked into this way of thinking that teaching is a helping profession. We're doing it for the children, so and so and so forth. And we forget that children are malleable. We forget that children are capable of complex thought, that they are capable of evolving in their mindset and their perspective. And it is really hard to overwrite a first impression. If children come to mathematics, come to ELA, come to science, come to social studies, and we shape their worldview and their perspective around, this is what it means to do this subject, this is what it means to do school, it takes so much more work to overwrite that first impression. And so it is a little terrifying. I experienced it myself in the classroom, where I had been trained on teach the algorithms, have them, I do, we do, you do, whatever. And then all of a sudden, here's these new standards. And it's like, oh, by the way, everything that you've been doing, you've been damaging the children. So fix everything about yourself. But we're not going to give you the time or the space to figure out how to do this new thing. And we're not going to train you on it. We're just going to, once again, put it on your shoulders and good luck, figure it out. We're going to blame you when it goes wrong. And that's a very scary place to be in. I think teachers feel a lot of pressure to constantly get it right, because that has been the perception forever. When it was, one house school marms, it's always been, you are the one responsible. And so we are going to hold you accountable for everything, but we're not going to give you any space to grow and develop. We're just going to, we're going to make decisions and hold you accountable for the results of them.
I mean, it's so real, like what you're saying. And I know so many people listening are probably like, it's hitting where it hurts. But I wonder something, I wonder if part of it is the way we frame it as, we're saying something like, oh, now we've learned that things we've been doing for decades have damaged children. I'd like to actually pause at that statement for a second. There's so much pressure there. First of all, when you know better, you do better. Sometimes we just don't know things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we think about how every week a new food, it's like, oh, strawberries are actually, they cause fucking cardiac arrest. Like, they've been good for you up till now. Like, you're not going to, the strawberry farmers aren't like, fuck, okay, first of all, that's not a sign. There's nothing wrong with strawberries, but you know what I mean?
Pale people don't drink orange juice and go in the sun because it'll burn your skin from the inside out.
Right? Like, whatever. There's always some new thing. Like, it's like wine is good for you. Then it's not. The sun was good for us. Remember how good the sun was. Now it's going to burn us to a crust. It's not like think about it. Let's just go back to my strawberry example, which isn't a true example, but the strawberry farmer or whatever isn't like shit. I've spent years poisoning people and I've done wrong. They didn't know. They literally didn't know. So we're always doing the best we can in the moment. But I'd also like to argue, but I'm curious what you think. Let's say, okay, I'm trying to think of something we can agree on is not a great practice, maybe, that a lot of people could agree on. Like, let's say doing mad minutes, getting students to get up in front of the entire class and being timed. So let's say it's a harmful practice, okay? Which a lot of us can agree that it is. Some may not, whatever. There are many of us, okay, who grew up in that time with that practice, who actually developed a very healthy relationship with math. And I would argue it's because regardless of the pedagogy and the curriculum, the teacher believed in, like, let's just say for me, I mean, the Mad Minutes I remember doing them, but I remember my teacher was so lovely and believed in me. And there was all this other stuff going on under the covers of the practice. She was just doing what she thought was a good practice because she was told to. Could we just not say, even though some of the practices, like maybe teaching through the algorithm, maybe not, people debate on the benefit of that practice, that you're not actually necessarily damaging students? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to take the pressure off.
So I think it's twofold, right? Part of it is, I would say that you thrived in spite of the practice, not because of it.
Yes,
and the thing that was, the in spite of was because you had someone who was lovely and who was validating. And I would say, I mentioned earlier, my son did Bad Minutes in first grade for his addition facts. Now, my son has me for a mom, right? Like we do math at home together on a regular basis. And so he's not a slouch when it comes to his mathematical ability so far. Like he's been doing really interesting thinking for a long time. And because he was a COVID kid, he did not do a whole lot of writing. Like, he didn't go to preschool. His kindergarten year was the first year back post-pandemic, whatever post-pandemic means. And I told his kindergarten teacher, I was like, look, the content standards that you guys are covering this year, we took care of them at home already. Like, he's got it. I need him to kind of learn how to function as a student. And so I need to work on, his handwriting and listening and staying seated and like the things that we've unfortunately determined make you good at school, right? I was less focused on his academic learning so much as his social learning that year. Yeah. So then he gets to first grade and he's still not a super proficient writer. And so he comes out of school one day stomping, crying, like so upset. And I'm like, what's going on? And it was the Mad Minutes, because when I verbally asked him all the questions on that page, he did it in 20 seconds. But because his handwriting had not developed to the same ability, he was getting zeros on these assignments because he couldn't write down as quickly as he could think. So we were assessing, like, his assessment wasn't assessing the thing that they thought they were assessing. And that happens all the time, right? And so he doesn't know that that's why he's frustrated. I know, because I'm his mom and because I'm a grown adult. And so what then is he going to say? He's going to say, I'm bad at math. Yeah. When it's not his mathematical ability that's causing the frustration, but he's 7. Yeah. He doesn't know that. I think that we do need to offer humans a lot of grace because we make the best decisions we can with the information we have. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that we double down and get defensive. And I think that that's the hardest part, is that we spend a lot of times being defensive as educators because we feel like we're getting it from all sides and we feel constantly under attack because we're not perfect and we're not doing everything for your sweet baby angel when there are 31 other sweet baby angels who also need our time and love. And so it's hard to sort of put that defensiveness aside and truly engage with, okay, is this just someone being mad at me and blowing off steam? Or is this something I genuinely need to examine? And trying to determine that when you're drowning in paperwork and responsibilities, it's hard. It's just really hard.
It's really hard. And, I think you're such a wonderful, because you're a coach, right? You work with teachers a lot, and you understand their plight because you've been a teacher, you've been in a variety of classrooms. I feel like we are in this very interesting place, like you've just said, where all of a sudden everything shifted to we need to be teaching thinking. If you're not doing that, you're potentially damaging kids by teaching them to mimic. As you've just said, there is so much to do. So someone might be listening to this thinking, yeah, I get it. I have examined it and I'm not being defensive. And I get that it would be better if I taught in this different way. And I don't have the bandwidth for it at this moment. And I don't want to feel like I'm damaging kids anytime I walk into the classroom. Like, what can I do? Or like, do you have anything to say to those teachers who are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Zach Champagne talks about this really beautifully when he talks about listen to kids and recognizing the humanity of the kid in front of you first. Like, yes, we have to teach content. Yes, we have a lot of responsibilities, but the humanity of the children in front of us and the humanity of our coworkers has to come first, because otherwise, what are we doing? You know, when we really stop to consider the humanity of the people in front of us, it becomes a little bit easier to assume the most generous interpretation of someone's actions. Now, once they have proven to you that that's not what this is about, like I like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but I like to do it once. Once you've shown me that that's not what's actually happening here, then we're having a different conversation. But but I would rather be generous with my interpretation and generous with someone's motivations and be proven wrong than think too harshly of someone and be proven wrong. Because if they were coming from a place of generosity of spirit and I assumed the worst of them, I've just made it harder for no reason. Yeah.
No, I love it. I think I'm particularly sensitive, to be honest, to never wanting, just because I've been in this scene for a few years now, and I've heard the way math ed is talked about, and what you said about when we are just like, this is the way to do it. And if you're not doing it this way, I've seen so much of that. And I understand it for the reasons you said. You know, like, I understand it because as people, we want to simplify things down to it's right and wrong. There's no gray area, just pick one. As, you know, we want to be really convicted in our own ideas. So we have the confidence in them so we can get buy-in from people. I get it. But what I've seen happen is so many teachers feeling like shit, walking out of a session being like, fuck, I'm still using the algorithm. And now this person says I'm damaging children. And that I hate, because no one, like, that's all. I think I'm very sensitive to hearing that, and then hearing from teachers who already are carrying math trauma, who already have their own baggage around math, now feeling that shit, because I learned through the algorithm and I finally mastered teaching the way I was taught. Now I'm being told to teach a whole different way. Otherwise, now I'm apparently damaging children, not only with my math trauma that's apparently contagious, but now because I'm teaching math the wrong way. Like, I just want to prevent that.
We shouldn't go around finger wagging at teachers and saying you're damaging children. I don't think that that's helpful to anyone ever. If someone has gone to a session and all they've taken away from it is a feeling of guilt, then that presenter didn't do a great job. Because I do present on occasionally, like on different ways without an algorithm or ways to build up towards an algorithm. And I don't often hear, now maybe they're not saying it to my face, so who knows? But what I often hear is, I hadn't considered that approach. I want to go try it and see what happens. So I don't want anyone to ever walk away saying like, oh, I need to change everything about my practice. But instead, if we inspire people to consider something that they hadn't considered before, and then they go, oh, well, what if I went back and showed that to my students? Like, how would that solve a problem that I'm having?
So the thing that I was going to ask you about 20 minutes ago, but it actually ties in perfectly, is we kind of started this conversation by saying, you were like, I'm kind of having beef with the whole idea that now all of a sudden we're saying people who like thrive on the algorithm, that algorithm life, are no longer real mathematicians, right? You started with this started with Dave fucking Grohl. Oh my God, I forgot. Yes.
When the ADHD takes over, there's no stopping it.
Oh my God. Okay, this is beautiful. So yes, we started with who would we call a real musician or not. Now we moved on to who would we call a real mathematician. It's shifted from the algorithm people to the creative thinking people. And now we're going to double up on all of that and say, what is the risk for those who consider themselves math people and those who don't? You brought up a point during one of our talks where you said, I actually think the idea of a math person is not only harmful for those who don't consider themselves falling into that camp, but even more so for those who do.
I think about it the same way that the patriarchy is not only harmful for women, but it's also harmful for men. Where
go off.
Where men are just as damaged by the patriarchy because if they do not conform to this idea of what it means to be a man, then they're not a real man, and then they are punished for not performing masculinity to the standards of patriarchy. And in the same way, we find that with mathematics, where if we are defining being a math person by being fast, by never asking questions, by always getting the answer right, by following the algorithms, like however we're defining it, if we set the standard and say this is what it means to be a math person, then the first time that your perception is altered, the first time that you encounter something that rocks that a little bit, it kind of shatters your confidence. I personally didn't care one way or the other about math. Like, I guess I was good at it. Yeah. Certified geek in high school, certified nerd, science Olympiad, took more math classes than I needed to graduate, whatever. Like, I didn't feel any type of way about it. I certainly did not anticipate that this was going to be my life growing up. Like, this was not the plan. And so I get to college and I take my first two kind of prereq math classes and they're fine. I take calculus and I faceplant hard. When I tell you I had to withdraw because I was going to fail, and then I did it again and I got a D, and then I barely managed to get a C the third go around. And it rattled my identity. It rattled who I was as a person, because prior to this, I hadn't really thought about math one way or the other, but other people had acknowledged I was good at math, therefore I must be smart. And the first time that I encountered some mathematics that didn't come to me easily, that it wasn't intuitive for me, I had one of two options. Either the math is stupid or I am.
Wow.
The teacher is stupid or I am. And for a long time, it was, well, that's the professor's fault. He didn't do a good job teaching me, or she didn't show me enough examples, or what, because if I have predicated my identity on being smart, and if I have predicated being smart on being good at math, and the moment that I'm not good at math, that takes out sort of the linchpin in my entire sense of self. And so,
oh my God.
And so when people like you and I come along and say, actually, math should be accessible to everyone, then if you've built your identity around being good at this thing that other people aren't good at, and I'm setting myself apart because I'm good at math, and that makes me special, and that makes me better than other people because this is something that not everyone has access to. When someone comes along and says, actually, we're going to redefine that thing, then you feel attacked. Because now we're taking away the thing that makes them special. Now, should that have been the thing that made them feel special in the first place? Well, I would argue no, because the practice itself was exclusionary, as mathematics has often been to women. As mathematics has often been to people who do not fit a certain mold. As mathematics has often been to folks who do mathematics in a non-Eurocentric way. I mean, think about Pascal's triangle and the fact that we call it Pascal's triangle when it existed in other cultures for centuries before Pascal.
It did?
Oh my God, yeah. There are so many things mathematically that we ascribe to white European men that existed in other cultures. And so if you have built this...
So whose fucking triangle is it?
Girl, I don't know. I should know. We need a producer's note from David. Where did Pascal's triangle come from?
David's on it. He's on it. He's already on it. Don't worry.
It's the people's triangle. Well, and that's why you hear some people refer to the right triangle theorem instead of the Pythagorean theorem, because the right triangle theorem was known prior to the Greeks.
Fuck me up. Okay.
And so all of that is to say that if you have built a sense of self around being good at math, and therefore you're smart, and therefore you're better than other people, then the idea that anyone could be good at math threatens your position at the top of the pecking order.
Yeah.
So that's for some people. And then for other people, it threatens their sense of self and their sense of who they are and their sense of, well, if I'm not good at math, then who am I? And I think we see that a lot with teachers as well, particularly when they leave the classroom, because they make being a teacher part of their identity. It's who they are, not what they do. And so once they don't have that anymore, well, then who am I without that? And it causes this sort of like crisis of character that I think sometimes we dismiss a little too easily.
And I think, this is the whole thing with labels in general. But what's interesting is I'm going to take this a step further. And wow, you've just segued this so nicely into like the final juicy thing I wanted to talk to you about. I was like, how am I going to tie this all together? And you just did it for me. You're actually here coming at us from your husband's streaming studio?
Yep.
Where he plays video games, I believe?
He does.
Okay. One of the things we were talking about that's completely tangential to what you're saying now is there is this whole rift in what you call geek culture, specifically about this quote unquote identity crisis. Take this a little further into what's happening right now.
Okay. So
in your world, in your geek world.
So I think that this sense of self is something that we equally don't pay enough attention to, and sometimes we pay a little bit too much attention to, which is weird because it's a matter of who gets the attention and who gets the moment, right? And so when we think about, math can be accessible to everyone in the same way that like, oh, if math is acceptable to everyone, then I don't get to be a gatekeeper anymore. And geek culture has been dealing with this since I would say since Gamergate, but honestly, it's been longer than that. It's been, since I was a child for sure, where women and certain like folks, like people of color, there's just been this sort of idea of who is a geek. So, remember that time when everyone was like, oh, draw a mathematician, and then they all the pictures kind of look the same. Yes. If you ask someone, draw a gamer or draw a nerd or draw, a geek or whatever, I'm sure you would get very similar drawings of this kind of stereotype of what it means to be a geek, what it means to be a gamer, what it means to be whatever. And my pet theory is that humans just want to belong somewhere. Like that is the core of everything. And it doesn't mean that they want to belong to everyone, but it does mean they want to belong somewhere. And so if they are being excluded in certain avenues of life, then they're going to go where they feel welcome and where they feel accepted. But I think that for folks like geeks and gamers and folks who maybe didn't fit a certain definition of cool, there's a little bit of resentment. There's a little bit of harboring of that sense of being excluded. And so when the tables turn and they get to be the gatekeeper, some folks jump on that opportunity. And so, you get the stereotype of the guy who, sees someone and quizzes them on obscure Star Wars characters because they're going to prove their nerd metal. They're going to prove their geek metal. They're going to, I'm going to test whether or not you actually belong here. And I think in the same way, folks who have self-identified as math people because of being good at the things that we used to define as being good at math, there is that sense of gatekeeping, that sense of, well, how do I know you actually belong here? I can't tell you how many students would ask me to multiply two 7-digit numbers together to prove that I was good at math. And I was like, babe, that's not what math is.
I got it all the time. You said something earlier about paying the price.
Yeah. So if I got called to gaming, then because I am obsessed with video games, and that meant that sometimes that I was not the first kid picked in the sports at PE. Like I had to sort of pay the price of popularity for the things that I love. And I don't know that it's the same way for the kids now. I think kids have gotten pretty good.
I think it's a bit different. It's a bit different, but I don't think it's non-existent.
Adults are just tall, hurt kids. And so I don't think that we let go of the things that hurt us when we were younger. We might say that we
100%.
do, but there's always that like it sort of shapes and forms who you are. And so if I felt like I belonged to mathematics and belonging to mathematics meant that I was excluded elsewhere, then if someone else gets to just be good at math, but they didn't have to pay for it with their popularity, they didn't have to pay for it with their time, they didn't have to pay for it with who they got to hang out with, then they haven't paid the price of admission. They haven't paid the cost of, like you can enjoy anime, but it means that you're not going to be cool. You can enjoy video games, but it means you're not going to be cool. And so then if someone else comes along and likes anime and is cool, and who likes Warhammer and is cool, Henry Cavill, like, I think some folks have a sense of resentment towards those folks because how dare you like those things and you didn't have to pay, you didn't have to let something else go in order
you didn't have to make a sacrifice.
Exactly. And so it's something that I think the children are a lot better about now, but I wonder if that's because the parameters have shifted and they've got their own thing that, like, if you like this thing, then you can't be cool.
Yes, I think you're right. I think that's a very, very good point you just said at the end. Maybe they have a new thing that you can't like this and be cool. Like what it is to be cool has changed. Like there's a lot there. I also am wondering, I don't know who Henry whatever is. I don't know what Warheads. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
He was Superman. And I'm going to have to send you a picture of him because is he a hottie? He's a beautiful man. Like,
well, the reason I bring this up is I'm curious if in gaming culture, because some people listening might have no idea what Gamergate is, by the way. Okay. So can you summarize just in a couple of sentences? Because I want to
Gamergate claimed to be about ethics in journalism, that women who were making video games got favorable coverage and some man children got their undies in a wad over it. And then it turned into online harassment campaigns, threats of violence, threats of sexual assault, threats of death. And it became this sort of linchpin moment of we get to set the parameters for whether or not you are allowed to exist in the space that we've claimed as our own. And so that has sort of rippled out into anti-woke culture, into like a lot of what we're seeing in modern discourse and the so-called manosphere and all of these things. You can sort of trace it back to that moment in time of this group of people defining, we set the standard for what it means to be a gamer. We set the standard for what it means to belong to this moment.
And truly, one of those standards were that you had to be a man, right? Like, so now my question is now with Henry Cavill, was that his name? Mm-hmm. With whatever Superman hottie who's a gamer. My question is to you, because I have no idea. Is it gendered or is it like anyone who is traditionally cool and good looking can't be in? Like, do the men, are they getting the same bullshit treatment that the women got? Is he getting death threats?
I would sincerely doubt if he's getting death threats. I don't know him personally, so I can't ask. But I do know.
Get him on the podcast.
Call his agent, see what happens.
I talk about this so much and you and I talk about it so much. Yeah. We're at such an interesting time where it's like, things have shifted. We're seeing intelligent female characters in teen movies and stuff, but there's still no cheerleader that's good at math. I think there's still boundaries around these characters. Like, Ginny and Georgia, like Ginny's pretty and smart and cool, but it's in English. Like math is still never brought up. Like, I just think there's still this very interesting.
I did want to ask you about this, actually. Have you seen Mean Girls?
Of course.
So what do you feel about the character of Katie? Because, does she end up having to sacrifice being cool for going to be a mathlete?
Well, this is the most controversial, I think, example, because you could say both. I still think it is a movie personally where the trope is the cheerleader popular girls. She was pretending she was dumb in front of them. Otherwise, she wouldn't be included. She was dumbing herself down to get the guy. In the end, she's like, fuck all of that. And she perseveres and she joins the mathletes and everything's good. She decides to be true to herself and go for math. Now, the plastics and the cheerleaders sucked, but it was still the divide, right? She had to choose one or the other.
I mean, quite frankly, I don't know if the plastics are what you aspire to be in life.
But you don't. But that's not the point. They were also a trope, right? Like cheerleaders could be pissed off too and be like, oh my God, why are you painting us like that? Like it's always this, the idea of the dichotomy of the divides of like, there's this group and that group and the other group. I think those
tropes only really exist in movies sometimes, because when I think about my own high school experience, like, there were athletes, but there were athletes who were theater kids. There were cheerleaders who were not super popular. I think that we categorize people into like, you must belong to this group. You're an element of this set, and therefore you cannot belong somewhere else. And yet a square can also be a rectangle. If we feel as though we need to belong to one thing, then yes. If we are cognizant of the fact that humans are just complex, then I think it becomes a little bit easier to be like, okay, you can exist in multitudes. But I do think that if that's all you have going for you, then you're going to defend that very fiercely. And I think that some people have mistaken a hobby for a personality and don't then realize that they have more work to do on becoming a fully complete human.
A lot there. So much to think about. Honestly, I mean, there's so much. We've gone all over the place here, but you're just one of my favorite people to talk to. And we have to wrap up. We have to wrap up with the final 2 questions that I ask every single person. Question number 1. What if you could change one thing about the way math is taught in schools? What would it be?
I would change the perspective that math is a solo activity. Because my favorite memories in college were sitting around on the 3rd floor of the math building with my classmates, staring up at a whiteboard, trying to solve a problem together and like throwing different things literally at the wall to see what would stick. And I think we overemphasize this idea of math as an individual accomplishment when most papers are co-written. When something like an Erdős number exists, that, you know, an Erdős number is like a Kevin Bacon number, but for math writers.
We don't have time for this.
I'm
David's
sorry.
doing this in
I'm
his
sorry.
mind, but now I need to know what. Just tell me what it is. I need to know what it is.
An Erdős number is like how, like if you co-wrote with Paul Erdős, a mathematician, you have a number of 1. If you wrote with someone who wrote with Paul Erdős, you have a number of 2. So it's a Kevin Bacon number, but for math.
Guy? Oh my God, that is so fucking nerdy. I love it. Next question. If somebody was listening to all of this and they were like, yeah, cool. I'm just not a math person, what would you say?
I'm married to that person. Quite frankly, that's my husband. So I do this for a living.
The gamer?
Yes.
The geek?
Yes.
Huh.
I am married to that person. And what I would say is, okay, just like with algorithms where we swung too hard the other way, we swung too hard into this idea that everyone can be a math person, therefore everyone should be a math person. And in the same way that I am allowed to not like poetry, in the same way that I am allowed to not like thrillers and like horror movies, I'm allowed to not like every aspect of mathematics, but I do think that that perspective doesn't shift until we open up the meaning of what mathematics is. Because if you say the word math and I say the word math and we hold different definitions of that word, we're never going to be in agreement on what it means to be a math person and whether or not it's okay to be one or not.
I love it. I love everything you said. I loved having you on. I could talk to you for 10 more hours. You're amazing. You're such an inspiration. I'm so glad. We will leave you with Shelby's favorite question, which is a hot dog a sandwich?
You tell us. Go to social media and let us know whether or not you think a hot dog is a sandwich. I'm not wearing my hot dog shirt today. Sorry.
Okay. You rock. See you on our bye.
Vanessa, goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Okay, like, come on. Where do I even begin to summarize all of that? Honestly, I think one of my favorite things about Shelby is she doesn't hold back. Like, she doesn't sugarcoat. She just says it like it is. And she's fearless when it comes to holding both institutions and individuals accountable for their role in shaping not just our education system, but our entire world. And she does all that while holding compassion for all the teachers out there who are literally trying their best within a completely chaotic timeline. If something in our talk made you like spit out your coffee or react in a far less dramatic but still excited manner, text me. I want to hear from you. You can find the link to text the podcast in your show notes. You can email me. You can DM me on Instagram at The Math Guru. But also please rate the podcast on your app, write a quick review if you can, and most importantly, share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. A reminder that this episode would not exist without the amazing David Kochberg, aka our producer and sound engineer, that I'm your host, Vanessa Vicaria, and that the song, soundtrack, music you're listening to right now is by our band, Goodnight Sunrise. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you next Thursday. The thing about Shelby, guys, is Shelby has an opinion on everything. Right?
It's true.
And not only that, like, sure, you know what? A friend I have says opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. But the thing is, and I'm not saying this to be demeaning to anyone else, Shelby's opinions are so fascinating to me.
I'm so glad that I have a fascinating asshole.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Well, we are at a hot start here, let me just say. And that was not a pun in any way. That was not related.